Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hero Movie Podcast, your greatest source for superhero movie discussion in the multiverse. I'm your host, Adam Porters, and I'm joined by sweet Sean Kovacs from the internet.
I'm going to throw you out the window now.
And of course, Bruce Leslie.
I'm a prickly pear, and wasn't Richard Parker the name of that tiger on that raft in that movie about a guy and a tiger on a raft?
Guy Tiger Raft movie? Is that from...
Yeah, it's called Tiger Raft.
Oh, you remember Tiger Raft.
Yeah, won an Emmy or something.
About the Emmy-winning Tiger Raft. No, we are not talking about Tiger Rafts today. We're talking about Amazing Spider-Man from, get this, boys, is it 2012? Is that when this movie came out?
Unreal, man. This is 10 years old almost.
Holy
Incredible.
cow. So, little bit of quick history for everybody listening. This is episode 351 of Hero Movie Podcast, and all the way back on episode 1 of Hero Movie Podcast, we reviewed The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and this 350 episodes, we never talked about the first Amazing Spider-Man movie. So, we're back doing that this week, and I gotta say, I was kind of excited to get back into this one.
Really?
I had not seen this movie since the movie theater.
So
when it first came out.
So we'll talk about, see if it kind of holds up or got better over time. Is it a fine wine or a stink of cheese? I don't know. But first, we do have to thank everybody who supports this show over at patreon.com/HMP. There you get the pre-show, post-show, and of course, Dinger Zone. And we want to say big thank you to everybody that supports us over there. Now, if you do, remember, when you sign up, you will be able to get your HMP nickname. We've got an entire master sheet, so if you've been on Patreon, and you haven't checked this out yet, there's a link in all the Patreon notes, so go scroll through that, find the link, and go fill out the sheet there. And if you haven't gotten a name yet, let us know in there, and we'll do that, and we'll work on a couple nicknames for next week. So please do that. And again, support the show any way that you can. You do get all of this stuff, pre-show, post-show, Dinger Zone, all that kind of good stuff. Just whatever value you get out of this program, put that back into a dollar form, send it our way. We really appreciate it and love all of you guys for doing that. And if you can't do that, for heaven's sake, at least share the show with a friend. Tweet us out. Put us on Facebook. Whatever you've got out there, just let somebody else know that this show exists. We'd really appreciate it. And also, you can review us on iTunes. Give us a 5-star review, a.k.a. Humdinger.
Humdinger.
And we've got one of those here for you this week. It is entitled Great Podcast, 5 stars. This comes from Class C Swave.
Ooh.
That's as best as I can get here.
Suave?
Suave. Well, I think that's probably what they intended. Yeah, Classy Suave. Very nice. And it reads as follows. This is a great superhero podcast. I'm not surprised that with over 300 episodes, I don't see Avatar: The Last Airbender. The series, not the movie. Very specific. I hope you guys would watch and review that. I don't know why anyone would deprive themselves of the joy of watching the greatest kids show. Not a kids show, cartoon ever. Regardless, great podcast. You guys are appreciated. Thank you, Classe Suave. We appreciate that, man. And they've got a couple other reviews. We'll do those in the coming weeks and stuff. But you should do that as well. Whatever, even if it's not, iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever it is, just review it. That way it gets out to more people. Hopefully, eventually, some algorithms pick up and all that kind of good stuff. And we appreciate that.
It's been 7 years. We need them algorithms.
Get the algorithm. Well, it's weird because it kind of goes in fits and spurts. Like this month, we're up way more than what we normally are. And I honest to goodness, I think the numbers reasons is because, one, we're doing WandaVision 30 questions. So that gets a little traffic, and then some of that traffic comes over here, but it's things are going up, and it's because of you guys, and we really appreciate that. That's how it works, man. Bruce, we have a little bit of something here. We don't do this quite enough, but it's not quite mail, but we're gonna do this.
Bale's here.
Now, this isn't quite mail, but it is a comment that we got over on our YouTube page, and I want to do this a little bit more. If we get some really good YouTube comments over there.
This is a long YouTube comment,
but it's a long one, but it is the most involved I've ever seen, and it was on the Super Buddies episode. So for those of you that don't know, each episode
about your algorithm.
Exactly. Each episode of Hero Movie Podcast is also uploaded uploaded. The audio is uploaded on our YouTube page. We've got like around 3,500 subscribers over there. Little small numbers, but we're getting bigger and bigger. And again, that's all because of you guys. So if you're at a place where you don't have access to your thing, but you do YouTube, check us out on YouTube there. But this one comes to us from the episode where we reviewed Super Buddies.
And it is from YouTube user Risa Puppy Dog Pals.
And I picked this specifically to brighten Sean's day.
So I was scrolling through Buddies movies and came across this and decided to watch this. And you guys did pretty good. And as a 12-year-old who has grew up with all the Buddies and probably the biggest fan of the Air Bud Buddies franchise, I gotta agree, this is not the best Buddies movie. So is Treasure Buddies. And if you read the Super Buddies book, it's not as bad. The book ended with the Buddies giving back the rings and being known for something in their town like their father, Air Bud Buddy. And it was leaving a good ending to write another story. And also, the franchise didn't end. They just took a break for a long time since Disney lost the license for Buddies Air Bud, probably due to animal abuse. I love just throwing that in there, Risa. In fact, a new Air Bud film is in the works, which will probably star the Buddies since it's a sequel, and the Buddies were in World Pup and Seventh Inning Fetch. Those were Air Bud 3 and 4 as supporting characters. But Disney will most likely not be a part of the new Air Bud, which is a good thing because it probably won't be as bad as the ones Disney helped with the production, like Super Treasure and Spooky Buddies. I know this is a podcast for superhero movies, and I'm going on and on about Air Bud Buddies. But since you said in the podcast you haven't seen the original Air Bud, I highly recommend all the Air Bud movies and the first two Buddies movies, Air Buddies and Snow Buddies, because they're pretty good in my opinion, but not the rest of the Buddies movies. Well, anyways, sorry for the long comment and for going on and on about Buddies Air Bud. But anyway, hope you have an awesome day.
I love this so much.
It's the best ever.
I love this so much.
This 12-year-old kid wrote a great love letter to Air Buddies, and it made my heart sing.
It is so wonderful.
Sincere.
It's
Yes,
so wonderful.
sincere.
And, it's one of those things where, you have when you are 12 years old, you have your opinion and you know that opinion is correct. And that's all there is.
Oh, yeah.
And, but here's the thing. Treasure Buddies, Space Buddies, Hero Buddies, they are not as good as the first ones. Our commenter is correct. As someone who has watched many just awful dog movies, the Buddies franchise was like the gold standard of dog movies, and I can tell you that I like when they're in the town. By the time that they go to their town and they're set up, and you got the Buddies, and you have your Cliff Clavin there, and like it's just the best. I just love it.
Oh, these dogs, they got a little bit of outfit on it, so it's cute. Yeah, it is cute, Cliff Clavin.
Thank you very much for this letter. Or this comment. It's so great.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you, Risa Puppy Pals.
Well, let's get into it. This week, we are covering Amazing Spider-Man from 2012. Here is the trailer.
How did you get out there?
Fire escape.
It's 20 stories.
Your doorman's intimidating.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Parker.
Not much to tell, really.
Peter lives with his aunt and uncle.
Did you catch that spider guy yet?
No, but we will. This guy wears a mask like an outlaw.
I think he's trying to do something maybe the police can't.
Can't?
If you're gonna steal cars, don't dress like a car thief.
You a cop?
You seriously think I'm a cop in a skin-tight red and blue suit?
Who are you?
I know it's been rough for you, Peter. I forgot all about that thing. It was your dad's.
Your father was a very secretive man, Peter.
Dr. Connors, I'm Richard Parker's son.
Your father and I were going to change the lives of millions, including mine. Extraordinary. How did you come up with this? There's a rumor of a new species in New York. It can be aggressive if threatened.
created him.
That's not your job.
Maybe it is.
"38 of New York's finest versus one guy in a unitard."
If you want the truth, Peter, come and get it.
I am issuing an arrest warrant for the masked vigilante known as Spider-Man.
I'm in trouble.
Alrighty, that was the trailer for The Amazing Spider-Man from 2012. You know what time it is.
It's time for Bruce's Comic Book Connection.
Let's see what he's got for us this week, Bruce.
Gwen Stacy is a lady in Peter Parker's life, and Stan Lee stated that the inspiration for Gwen was his own wife, Joan. So isn't that kind of a sweet Valentine's Day adjacent comic book connection there?
Aww.
But Peter and Gwen met while underclassmen at Empire State University. And in a trope that never grows old, the geeky guy is totally oblivious to the hot girl making advances at him. Not satisfied with being ignored, Gwen dated Flash Thompson and Harry Osborn in attempts to catch Peter's attention. Though personally, I'm not sure how sound this romantic strategy is. It seems like regardless of the ethics of the situation, Gwen's play worked, and she and Peter became an item. It also happened that Gwen seemed to have a depth of character and intellect that Peter perceived as lacking in his previous lady friend, Mary Jane. Unfortunately, the relationship found itself on shaky ground after a battle between Spider-Man and Doc Ock left Police Captain George Stacy dead. Gwen blamed Spider-Man for her father's death, and she dealt with it in the only way a white middle-class college student knows how. She went to Europe. Now, it is kind of implied that she departed in an attempt to get Peter to propose so that she wouldn't go, but thank goodness he didn't, because marriage probably isn't something one should be manipulated into unless you're the child of a Middle Ages monarch and you need to strengthen an alliance or something. Now, eventually, Gwen Stacy died. And some folks will tell you that it was the Green Goblin who killed her. Then you might get a, well, actually, explaining that it was Spider-Man and not the Green Goblin who killed Gwen. Well, I live to actually the actuallys and tell you that it was, in fact, Mary Jane Watson who killed Gwen, or rather the reader's love of Mary Jane, the character, not the herb. Now, according to Stan Lee, who scripted all of the original stories featuring Gwen Stacy, the original intent was for Gwen Stacy to be Spider-Man's central long-term love interest. However, Mary Jane Watson's unexpected popularity with readers after her debut changed the course of the plan as fans liked Mary Jane more and demanded for her to be Peter Parker's main love interest instead. And that no matter how we wrote it, this is quoting Stan Lee here, no matter how we wrote it, Mary Jane always seemed more interesting. So with this, Gwen was fated to die. I don't think Lee could handle killing the young woman. Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway took over Lee's duties for the fateful issue. And in The Amazing Spider-Man number 121 from the summer of 1973, the Green Goblin abducts Gwen Stacy and lures Spider-Man to a tower of either the Brooklyn Bridge, as the art would suggest, or the George Washington Bridge, as given in the text of the situation. One of those great debates in comics about which bridge it was. Anyway, the Goblin and Spider-Man clash, and the Goblin hurls Stacy off the bridge. Spider-Man shoots a web strand at her legs and catches her. As he pulls her up, he thinks he's saved her. However, he quickly realizes she is dead. Unsure whether her neck was broken by the whiplash from her sudden stop or had been already broken by the Goblin prior to her fall, he blames himself for her death. A note on the letters page of The Amazing Spider-Man number 125 states, quote, "It saddens us to say that the whiplash effect she underwent when Spidey's webbing stopped her so suddenly was, in fact, what killed her." And that, folks, is the all too short life and untimely death of one of my favorite comic book women, Gwen Stacy.
And she stayed dead for a really long time in the world of comics.
She kind of still is dead.
Is she still technically?
Yeah, well, the 616 Gwen Stacy still is dead. We've got Gwen Stacy from another world, and then we've got someone claiming to be Gwen Stacy, but we're not sure if she really is.
Could be anybody. So this is from 2012. So as you might remember, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3 did some pretty decent business and stuff, but for whatever reason, Raimi and Sony could not come to a conclusion that they wanted to go forward in Spider-Man 4. So a couple years went by. Some would say not enough years, but nevertheless, you got to pump out some Spider-Man because your boy makes money on on the regular, really. And so
kind of crazy. It was only 10 years from Raimi's first Spider-Man to this. That time seems so much longer than it was.
Yeah. And so we got Mark Webb, who was coming, pardon me, off of 500 Days of Summer, which it was, had done like some really good business for, as far as, an independent film went, and got his name on the docket there. So his name coming to this movie was a big deal. Do you guys remember any of that?
I just remember because Spider-Man shoots webs and his last name was Webb. A lot of people making jokes about that.
Yeah, the obvious.
but did I miss something in 500 Days of Summer? Like, was there something there that would make me excited for the same director to come to Spider-Man?
Really? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that, on a rewatch here today, one of the things that stands out of having Mark Webb be your director is that he is very good at the interrelationship stuff. Mm-hmm. He's very, very good at it. And so when you see Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy, like all of those scenes work really well because he's very good at those scenes. What he's not so good at is the big scenes. But I thought that, and we'll get into it more, but he was a good choice as far as where Marvel was headed with Spider-Man, because remember, like during this time, well, maybe it's like around this time is when everything changed with Spider-Man in the comic books, right? Like we're like a couple years removed from when they just started over. Yeah. And the reason for that was because he was getting so out of control that writing a satisfying Spider-Man comic book was incredibly difficult. You have 17 clones and you have a million Carnage versions of Carnage and Venom, and like it just got so crazy that no matter what you did, it wasn't ever going to be satisfying.
And weren't they printing like 7 Spider-Man books under different titles at that time or something like that?
Well, I mean, if you include the Ultimate title, probably something like that.
It's like a really big amount.
This is around the time that, Bendis and the Ultimate title is really doing a lot better than the 616 title too.
Right.
And that's where I think, really, when I rewatch this, because it has been a while since I sat down and watched this movie, it really felt like what made specifically the Ultimate Spider-Man stuff, what made that feel so good is that we re-got that origin story and stuff, and it was just brought up to kind of a modern time. It was very much a lot of the same stories that you were kind of used to hearing about Spider-Man, but just told in a new, updated, and kind of more interesting way. And this movie feels a lot like that.
I'll say, Bendis has a particular writing style. Maybe even more so when he was writing Ultimate Spider-Man. But the joke is, if Peter Parker needs to blow his nose, it takes 4 issues.
Well, that's true. He didn't even get into the Spider-Man costume till I think issue 7.
So this does feel like maybe that some of that pacing is there, because I think there's plenty in this movie to be a fine movie, but it's not a fine movie. And I guess we'll get into why I feel that way. But boy, this is one of those things where it's like the difference between an okay movie and a not okay movie might be 35 minutes.
Well, and not only that, man, but when I hopefully one day am a grandparent, my grandkids will say, "Pappy, what were movies what did movies used to be like?" And I'll show them Amazing Spider-Man, because this feels like the oldest movie ever.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I felt like the same way too, but there's something about this rewatching with all of this, because even though it's 2012, it almost feels like it's older than that in some ways.
Yes,
but
a lot older.
But to me, I don't know. I found that to be more of a comforting blanket than something to sneer at.
Well, I look, I don't mean to sneer at this movie, but it's the same tropes that a lot of this style of movie have, and it's the thing that people, at this point, even regular folk watching a superhero movie are rolling their eyes. Like, you've got Peter Parker in high school with an actor who's 28 years old. He's literally 28 years old when they shoot this movie. You have the same old of, you have the mean jocks picking on the little kids, and that's just not the way high school works anymore. You have the thing of like, he's misunderstood by the cops hate him. Like, it's all the regular tropes that every single superhero movie of the 90s had.
And is the high school in Queens or Brooklyn? I always get kind of confused in this movie, but regardless, it doesn't look like a high school really would in Queens or Brooklyn when you look at the student body, something that is very different in the Tom Holland version.
Right.
Yeah.
And also I Emma Stone, beautiful, lovely, but I see her in a high school, even the way she looks in this movie, I'm assuming she's a teacher. You know what I mean? Like, you're not fooling anybody that she's 17.
She's a teacher's aide.
Yeah, but she's definitely, in my opinion, the best part of this movie. Like,
without a doubt,
that is my biggest regret about the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, is that, this really the best Gwen Stacy we may ever see on screen is buried in a movie that I guess you could say fan response was lackluster. I mean, it had a good box office, it got a sequel, but I don't know that many people say this is their favorite Spider-Man movie.
No, I would go so far as to say this is no one's favorite Spider-Man.
I will disagree with that, because from what I see on the internet, there is a group of kids that were like 13, 14 when this movie came out, and they feel just like we did with Tobey Maguire. That is their Spider-Man.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there is a group that really, really likes Andrew Garfield and digs on these. I really think it was right age, right time kind of thing.
Probably.
That's why there's a group of people that, like, supposedly, and then of course Tom Holland says it's like, that's not happening, which means it's probably totally happening.
Okay. I do want to say, what year did Homecoming come out? Like 2017?
That sounds close.
So if you're 13 years old in 2012, then you're 18 years old when Tom Holland's movie comes out. I think that's enough to wipe out your memory. I think it's a really specific group of people that would say this was their Spider-Man.
Maybe
it
they
was
were
2017, by the way.
Yeah, so 5 years. 5 years isn't enough window of time to really reinforce that.
Maybe 8 to 12. I don't know. All I'm saying is I've seen people just going, Andrew Garfield is my favorite. And I'm like, I can't explain it to you, but
there's a lot of people in the world. And when there's a lot of people in the world, there's a lot of opinions. And I like that.
Yeah, no, I think it's cool that somebody loves these movies a whole bunch.
But there's also, if you guys remember, even on Amazing Spider-Man 2, we kept gushing over the fact that Spider-Man is actually saying funny things to people, because he does not do that in the Raimi Spider-Man movies.
Right. Now, this was the first time that we kind of, and the best part is in the sequel to this one, they tripled what he was doing in this one. But this was the first time we really got to see Spider-Man kind of being the mouthy Spider-Man that we know from comics. And to me, that was just fantastic and something that we really, really needed.
I remember walking out of the theater. I saw it like July 4th weekend. Didn't have electricity at my house, so it was a really hot day. Walking out of the theater with my father-in-law. One thing I can remember saying, and it breaks down to like discussing the various Batman actors. I said he was a great Spider-Man, but his Peter Parker had the personality of a tree stump. So it was, I kind of had that in my mind that like Tobey Maguire was a better Peter Parker. Maybe this was a better Spider-Man. And then, of course, Tom Holland brings the two together really well.
Right. And the other problem that you have is that, no one would ever call Andrew Garfield an ugly kid, like he's an incredibly handsome man. And so it's really hard to believe that he's getting picked on and he's ostracized at school. That would never happen.
He's a tall guy who is, he's kind of a skinny kid, but
that's what I was going to say. He is a skinny kid, not to body shame the guy, but he's a skinny kid.
No, but the problem is he's skinny, and according to the internet, he's 5'10". If he was like, honest to goodness, if he was like 5'6" or something, that would change this character dramatically. And honestly, I think it would be the big difference between this performance and, anything else, is because he is just physically too big of a guy.
I think also maybe that's why they decided to go a different direction with Peter, because I'm not familiar with any other version of Peter that's like an overly introverted skater dude. He's like he seems like he should be the love interest in some knockoff Reality Bites from the 90s.
True. That said, though, on the other hand, you've got something that I thought was another great addition to the character and everything that we really didn't focus on in the Raimi Spider-Man movies is Peter Parker is smart, and we get to see it. I love seeing him put together all the web stuff. I love that he is, the smartest kid in the room. I really, really like that, and I'm so glad that they kind of kept a lot of the smart stuff going on, in Tom Holland Spider-Man and everything. But that's something that I think we ignored a lot in the Raimi version, comedy and brains.
Yeah. I think we got some comedy from Peter Parker. We just didn't get the quips from Spider-Man, and they course corrected on that here. But I feel like they left me unsatisfied with my Peter Parker. I know that was my initial takeaway, and then I've had almost 9 years for that to be reinforced before watching it again, and it's still there this time around.
I think I liked his performance better this time around. Like I said, I think the big thing, and it sounds so dumb, is just the physicality difference. When you see him talking with Gwen in the hallway, she's wearing these giant heels and everything. They're trying to get her up off the ground to be nearly as tall as this guy. Now, granted, the timeline doesn't match up or anything, but I think if you put Tom Holland in this role, this is a successful Spider-Man movie.
I don't, and the reason why I don't think that is because you have terrible action scenes. The most boring part of this movie is the end. You have all of these really cool moments, like when he shoots the webs down the sewer system so that he can, see the vibrations of where things are coming from. That part's great, but everything else about that entire scene is boring. It's just boring.
And the interstitials do drag a little bit. I have been criticized because I don't like it if it's not one big explosion after the next, or if it's not nonstop action, which is not true. I like all kinds of movies.
Lies.
This one has weak interstitials. It really does.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is the reason they brought Mark Webb on. Maybe they were trying to indulge that too much, but that's not something I'm wanting in my Spider-Man movie per se. Though I do love every scene that Gwen is in, and so maybe Mark Webb deserves some of the credit for that, but I also want to give a lot to Emma Stone.
Yeah, I think her presence really does kick up the whole thing. Not to say that Andrew Garfield's a bad actor, because we've seen him in tons of stuff, and the kid's a good actor. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, I'm not saying that he couldn't be a good Peter Parker, but it's just the character that was created for him to portray was a little bit too foreign to me, I guess.
Yeah, it's a little emo-y, and at the time, that was kind of the thing.
The problem is they're doing a thing that a lot of movies about young people will do. Well, it goes all the way back to John Hughes, where they take who is obviously the coolest guy if you ever met him in real life and try to act like they're just weird and everybody ostracizes him. But he's actually way too cool to buy into that. With Tobey Maguire and his hair parted on the side and all matted down, I believed he was a nerd or a dork or a geek.
And same with Tom Holland. It's easy to see Tom Holland as someone who gets picked on.
And, I went to high school in the late 80s, early 90s, but a guy walks in dressed like Andrew Garfield, dragging his skateboard, not wanting to make eye contact or talk to anybody. He is immediately going to be the coolest kid in school. Like, no questions asked.
Yeah, you don't question, Gwen would like this guy. You look at him and you just go, well, of course she would. Look at him. He's not going to have to work hard for this. That's a good-looking dude right there. It's like you look at them both and you're like, you two should be together, clearly.
Has every Spider-Man actor dated his co-star? Because didn't Toby date Dunst for a brief period of time? Yes. And I think that Tom Holland and Zendaya have dated. And then, of course, Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone dated a little bit. Is it is this one of those Hollywood things where they do it just for the press? Or do they really get people with such good chemistry that they just have to keep it going after the first movie but end it before the second movie?
It's what I tell everybody. It's like you need to find out if your relationship is going to work, and the best way to do that is pretend to be Spider-Man with somebody.
I love that dating advice. I could have used that many times in the past.
Be like, listen, you want to be Mary Jane? We got to try some stuff out. We'll see what happens.
But that is the best advice I've ever heard you give.
I do a lot. I've always. How do you guys feel about Lizard as a character within Spider-Man itself?
I think he's cool. It's like one of those rogues gallery, like with Batman, with the Flash. You've always got one or two main villains, but then you got these cool rogues gallery of villains that I think should be used more in movies. And I think it was a fine choice. It has the potential to be a really cool like monster to fight against.
I loved how Connors was portrayed and everything. I forget the Reese something. I can't remember his last name.
I can never pronounce it correctly.
It's a tough one. But he's fantastic. He's really, really good. I like the kind of weird mental break that we give, kind of the Lizard. And I just, now granted, the CGI is not perfect. Really, if they would have just been a little bit more daring and just gave him a little bit longer face, most of that CGI, I mean, again, back in 2012, it holds up pretty well, I think, all things considered.
I don't usually complain much about CGI, so I'm happy with it. I do think it was a conscious decision to make his face the way they made it. I wish they'd made the face, like you said, a little bit longer.
You don't even have to go all
serpentine.
You don't have to go all the way like the comic or anything. You don't need to be that big, but like 20% more length than what they had would have just changed that whole vibe, given a real proper Lizard look,
Because it does seem like an awfully round, weird-looking face.
It's a little strange.
Pretty weird. It is pretty weird. I always liked Lizard. He seemed like one of those ground level Spider-Man villains that you got a lot more in the earlier days, and then McFarlane just completely blew him up for that Spider-Man McFarlane run,
just wild and crazy,
where he's eating people and everything else like that stuff. That's the stuff that I remember very fondly. It's probably garbage now. I'm kind of afraid to go back to it to read it.
It's all about the art,
sure. But seeing that that's the Kirk Connors basically that we're seeing in this movie is the McFarlane run, with the exception of eating people, of course. But I do like I like the actor. I like the character. I just wish that the scenes were more memorable, the fight scenes, because it really is the Achilles heel of this movie.
I don't know. I always remember kind of the school fight and stuff, and then we see that in the hallway, and it's not overly amazing and super over the top, but I remember even at the time liking it because it wasn't as big as all of that, because we had at that point all of these super giant superhero films, and this one does pare it down for the most part to a pretty low level.
I think fight scenes must be really, really tough to direct and pull together right, because when you see a good one, you love it. You see one that's lackluster, you definitely don't, but I don't know that I could give that lackluster scene advice to make it better. It's one of those tough things. It's like when you got the knack, you got it, and if you don't, I can't teach it to you kind of thing.
It's really difficult, and depending upon, who you deal with, who you hire to do, everything from storyboarding stuff to previs, and then all the all the pieces tend to go together, and if you don't put them all together in just the right order, you do come up a little bit sloppy. Now I think there's movies that are like far worse off than this, but
sure,
some moments in it are just so much fun. Him swinging through, like when all the cranes come and do the big connecting thing, and he's swinging all through there. People may not remember it, but this movie came out in 3D, and holy smokes, it was great. And
I'm sorry, keep going.
But that whole just him just swinging through all of that stuff, and I like the first person kind of. I don't know if Mirror's Edge was out at that point. I feel like it was, where you're doing like a first person parkour kind of game. And when we get into that first person Spider-Man view a couple of times, I love that sort of stuff. I just thought all of being Spider-Man felt so good in this movie. His costume was great. It looked and moved and felt like it was fabric. So for the first time, it wasn't just, what looked like a Neo or, that super hard bodysuit kind of thing.
Yeah. And it didn't look like an all CGI Spider-Man like it did so often in those Sam Raimi movies.
Right.
Yeah, it looked like they kind of did stuff.
I'm glad you bring up the cranes, because that is the thing that I love most in superhero movies. I'm learning, and they do it in Spider-Man more than most other movies, which is where the citizens of the city rise up to help the hero.
I like that so much.
It is so wonderful to see. It's my favorite scene in this movie. It's my favorite scene in Spider-Man 2. It's my favorite scene in Captain America: The First Avenger, when the bad guys throw the kid in the water and the kid goes, "I can swim. Go get him." It's such a great moment.
That is great.
So you have that moment. There are moments in this movie that are really terrific, and that seems to be where all the for lack of a better term for something that we've seen 7 different movies of at this point, it's where the originality of this movie comes from, is the webs. Like, somebody clearly had that in their head as they were writing the screenplay, or like the putting the cranes together so that he can swing through the city faster. That's clearly in their head. I don't think that they had any good new ideas when it comes to the big set pieces in these movies, except for he's in the school, he's in the sewer, that sort of thing.
Oh,
and
I don't know. The whole sewer thing felt like a great, that felt like a Universal Studios ride, going through all of that water and stuff. And again, I got giant sound, so it makes things even bigger and grander than for most people. But I had a lot of fun with that.
In some weird way, though, I felt like I'd seen it before, like the sewer stuff. Yeah. And I mean, back in 2012, I felt like I'd seen it before. I mean, obviously I have now.
Well, clearly we saw it in Dolph Lundgren's Punisher.
That must have been where I was.
And it's done just as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, what do you guys have thoughts at all about Dennis Leary? I remember thinking that was kind of maybe an unexpected choice to be George Stacy.
Certainly an unexpected one. I'll say this: if you're gonna put Dennis Leary in stuff, these are at least the kind of roles that I'm okay with it, because it seems to match, I guess. Does that make sense? Like if you saw him in Rescue Me or this, where he's like some sort of law enforcement type guy,
that makes sense.
That I buy that, but I'm not gonna buy Dennis Leary as a guy who sells carpet samples.
Now, I don't know if this is a true story or apocryphal, but Dennis Leary had said that years before this movie was made,
he stole Jeff Bill Garland.
You guys know who Jeff Garland is, right?
Yeah,
sure. He loves cheese. Yeah.
Well, he said that he was hanging out with Jeff Garland. Jeff Garland looked at him and said, "You know what? You look like you'd be a good George Stacy." Now, I don't know if those words have ever been said in real life, but that is the story that I read.
That's pretty good.
As being true. And Jeff Garland, maybe he would be the kind of guy that would say that. I don't know.
So I have a very long sordid past with Dennis Leary. Dennis Leary
killed my dad.
Dennis Leary is from my neck of the woods. He's from Worcester, Massachusetts. Grew up there, born and raised. And so when he started popping up on the London Underground show on Comedy Central, I did not, I was in junior high, so it's not like I saw him in the clubs or whatever, but I knew just from my proximity to him that he was from New England. And that was rare at the time, because he seems like somebody who's from Massachusetts. He seems like he's from Boston, even though he was from Worcester, which is not Boston. But and then he starts popping up in those MTV commercials and the Nike commercials. And, he just keeps blowing up and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then he has his show, No Cure for Cancer. And I go and see him in Worcester. It's his first time back from being massively popular. And he goes back to Worcester at Mechanics Hall in Worcester. No one cares, Sean. Keep going. So he is my favorite comedian for a couple of years. And then when I learn where most of his material is coming from, I'm like, oh man, that really sucks. It's like, oh no, this guy that is I've kind of modeled my own stand-up after is not the guy that I think he is. And so now when I see him in things, I have mostly oh man, that's a shame kind of thing when I see him. It's not something where I hate him because I couldn't. But it's kind of like man, you really could have been something great, and instead you're George Stacy in the Spider-Man movie.
I feel like I don't have opinions about Dennis Leary. I have other people's opinions about Dennis Leary. It's kind of weird. It's like my knee jerk is I don't like him. And then when I ask myself, why not? It all just goes back to the Bill Hicks thing. And
sure.
And it's not even like I had to have a strong emotional attachment to Bill Hicks either.
Oh, and I think that's the biggest for me is like, it's hypocritical to say to a lot of comedians, but like, I don't get Bill Hicks. I understand why people like him, just not for me. But so I never really cared one way or the other about that. But you can say this about Dennis Leary: the dude has raised a lot of money for cancer research and stuff.
Yes,
so you cannot
him,
you can't slight the guy for that because he's done that. He's done that show for like what, probably 2 decades or something like that.
Yeah, the guy that said he didn't care if he had to get a tracheostomy because of smoking. He would just stick cigarettes in the tracheostomy until they called him Tracheostomy Man. Well, good for him.
Yeah, it's I can never really harsh the guy too bad on that because he's brought a lot of good to places that needed it. So it's tough to really bag on him too awful hard.
Sure. You need the good stuff in the world, so thank goodness for good stuff.
Now let's talk about somebody that we can bag on all day long, Martin Sheen.
I thought you were going to talk about Sally Field the way you said that.
How dare you?
First of all, no. I love both. These are my favorite incarnations of these characters. I love them so much. When Sally Field first was announced, I was like, this is absolutely perfect. I never really liked the super old Aunt May who's just like always like 2 steps away from death. I hate that one. Now, and granted, Marissa Tomei, we all know why we like that. But what it should be is this, right? It's someone in her, kind of late 60s or whatever.
And let's be honest. Let's say Smokey and the Bandit, Sally Field, she gives Marissa Tomei a run for her money all day.
A run for her money, she far surpasses her, sir.
I mean, you got to count. People have their particulars. I'm just saying, Sally Field, a handsome woman.
Oh my word!
I never felt that way about a nun until I saw The Flying Nun.
1979, Sally Field, get out of here.
But she's fantastic in it. I really, really love her. And Martin Sheen is so darn good. And I love this telling of Uncle Ben's death and everything. I think they do it in a very succinct, very quick way. We give enough fun hints back to the comic and stuff. And again, this is like what I was saying with the Ultimate Spider-Man. We're telling the same story again, but we are telling it in just enough of a new, enough creative way that it really works. And it's like picking up a comic. You may get like a new writer or a new artist in this this next issue that you get, and they won't be there forever. Eventually, those people will move on, and you'll get something else. But for me, when you go back and read some of those books, you go, "Oh man, I remember that time. That was a good time." I felt like that with this movie. I felt like reading an old comic.
One thing I think turned me off from the beginning, like even back in 2012 when I saw it, you start right off with Peter's parents. And I just did not care that much about that story. I mean, it's been explored a couple different times in the comics. And it's the kind of thing I'm like, well, this isn't going to pay off till the 3rd movie, which of course never happened. So now I really don't like wasting all that time with Peter's parents in the beginning. I kind of wish they had started the story on chapter 2 or 3 instead of where they started it.
But what happens with Embeth David's character?
Oh boy, isn't that what we want to know?
Yeah, we don't necessarily need it, but and I certainly don't like the way that it quote unquote paid off somewhat in the second Spider-Man movie, which essentially
pay off.
No, hold on.
What it is.
I'm not. Well, I'd say that's why I said sort of quote unquote paid off, because we learned that somehow Peter's DNA is the only one who could have been bitten by that spider, and that turned him into Spider-Man. That ruined it. That was really a crummy writing story. And I think some of that bad feeling does linger over to this one because we kind of know where that's going. So there's a little bit of stink on that first scene because it's not, honest to God, in this movie, just as a standalone case, it's not bad. It really isn't that terrible. But when you think about what's coming in that second film, and you're bound to do it when you're watching this one, it's like, geez, you don't need any of this. This is no good. It's fine for what it is, and I like it being in there for this movie solely. But, man, when you put it in context with that second film, ugh.
I think there's a big argument to be made that the first movie should be a standalone movie. And I think that whole opening thing with the parents makes this not a standalone.
Yeah.
Like this movie's totally dependent on something you have to wait 2 years to see.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I don't think
maybe at the beginning of the second movie where you're going to pay it off, then you have the flashback to before, and then show that then.
Perhaps, but
you show it here.
I think the problem is that they had I don't know, because
they had big plans that
just didn't pan out, really.
The best laid plans of mice and men, yada, yada, yada.
Boo. But for what it was okay. But I liked the Uncle Ben death in this one. I thought it was well enough earned. And again, it was nice and truncated. It felt like we were getting that bit of the story, but didn't have to wait, super long to do it.
Are you super excited though if we learn that Campbell Scott is in the new Spider-Man coming out? Are you really excited for that?
Man, Campbell Scott. I saw Singles and then I saw this. I don't know if I've seen anything else with Campbell Scott. He's going to be in the Patton remake someday. I know it.
He's fine. Oh, big shout out to the late great Efren Khan in this, man. I love that dude. He was just in darn near everything, and but cut off very short. He died just last year.
Oh, yeah. I did not know that. That is absolutely.
But
sad.
he's one of those guys. He is just a fantastic character actor. He's got that unrecognizable face, and he's in so many things. And I really wanted to see him get involved more in that Jurassic World stuff as it went on. So it's sad to see him go, but nice to see him in this movie.
I think he ends up hosting Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
For real?
He was in the Slumdog Millionaire movie.
He's in Slumdog Millionaire.
I thought you were serious. I was like, wow, I missed something.
He was
there's international productions of the show.
Man, you remember when that show was the biggest thing on earth? Holy cow.
I do.
What a weird time that was, where it was just Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was the biggest thing. I don't know if the internet age would allow that to happen.
Can I tell you a secret? I wanted to be a millionaire.
Well, so what's it like?
It's painful.
Painful not to get it. I understand that.
Especially, sitting at home and I know the answer to everything in a row. And I'm like, why don't I call somebody or something and try to actually be on the show? But I lacked that motivation back then.
That's how I am with Jeopardy. I know I come off as a not very smart person on this show, but I watch Jeopardy on a good regular basis and I'm not horrible at it.
My freshman college roommate was on Jeopardy, and I know I'm smarter than him, so I should have done it, but not now.
I did have a buddy who was on Wheel of Fortune, and he won everything. He went all the way up, won all the stuff, and I met him on the street in Charlotte. I just happened to be walking down, the actual downtown streets and stuff. And we had done stand-up together just kind of shortly. We weren't super big friends, but we were acquaintances and stuff. And I just happened to be passing by. I see him, and we go, hey, man, what's up? What's up? And it was the best, conversation ever because he came out and just goes, well, that's about all we got to say to each other, isn't it? And I go, yeah. Well, good seeing you. Good seeing you. Boom. And we left. It was the greatest ever because you didn't have to sit around and do some fake conversation about well, how's his wife? Blah, blah, blah. We didn't really know each other that well. It was just hey, what's up? I remember you. I remember you. All right. Well, peace out. See ya.
So back to the movie here. Were you guys cool with the reverse the polarity trope? The ticking time bomb here at the end is getting the cure into the disseminator to send it over the city instead of the poison, basically reversing the polarity there.
It's fine. I mean, it's kind of a paint by numbers thing, like most of this movie is.
But also, with a big superhero movie, if you've got a good cast, you've got good action, I think you should keep those plot points kind of comic book like and simple and straightforward. So I think that was a good decision because I could have seen it. Really, in this movie, the way things were going, I could have seen a really convoluted challenge coming up at the end.
And that's kind of what I like about this movie is that it feels like one of the last of this era of comic book movies.
Yes, totally.
They really didn't make them quite like this anymore. And not that this is bad, but this is kind of the peak of that era, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. It's the last of its kind. Well, I think Amazing Spider-Man 2 is probably the last of its kind.
Yeah, but like this great giant over-the-top score that is just pounding on you the whole time. The lizard's voice just rattling the subwoofer is kind of amazing. It's so over the top and insane, but that's why I like it, because it just feels like a strange, odd throwback. But that's me. Well, let's get down to it.
Hold on, we're missing one. We're missing one substantial piece of this movie.
Okay.
C. Thomas Howell.
Yes, he's the guy that gets the cranes lined up.
That's
he would have
right.
made a good Peter Parker in his younger days.
Or now.
Okay.
Can you see him in high school? Hello, fellow kids.
I feel like I read something too that he was really hoping for a much bigger role in this movie too.
Maybe, but look, he's got a fantastic role. I really like that bridge scene. I thought for like our first big getting to see Spider-Man really kind of stretching his powers and everything, I thought that was a really great scene, and we've got him getting that kid, and that then informs that character later, which then gets all that stuff going.
That's pretty great.
I really love how that's well written. And to me, when you have that moment of like, hey, everybody, we're getting in here, we're working overtime for stuff, and it's a payoff to something that you planted in there 50 minutes ago, and it holds up so well. I really like that.
Yeah, the movie is lacking a scene that you talk about. Like even bad movies, even Spider-Man movies that maybe you don't like, they kind of have at least that scene you point to. It's like, yeah, you remember that's the movie where this happened. Right. I don't think this movie has that scene in it anywhere.
I'm telling you, if we could have had like a longer face on that lizard and have him in a lab coat at some point,
that would have been solid. Yeah,
boy, it would have been. It
solid.
Really would have just put it up to 11.
But even like the Raimi's third Spider-Man that most people don't like, you still remember that goofy scene of Peter Parker like jiving down the street. Yeah,
you remember the
like
dancing.
There's not really anything memorable. Even in the sequel to this, there's a couple of memorable scenes, but this one, nothing memorable, and I just watched it.
Yeah, it's nothing there's no big, I don't want to say a big set piece, because there is a big set piece at the end, but it's not as distinctive as you would hope and want it to be. But again, that's something I kind of like, is that it is very, blue beam to the sky kind of thing. Or in this case, we've got a green beam turning it to a blue beam, or blue rain, or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
But before we get to our final review, we do have to ask ourselves one very important question: is how this movie relates back 1-to-1 with Sylvester Stallone.
Thank you, Adam. I have a prepared statement. Imagine wow, you really went deep on that one. Oh. Imagine for a moment that you're attending the 50th Annual Academy Awards. The year is 1978, and you're shoulder to shoulder with all the Hollywood luminaries of the era. Ernest Borgnine, Red Buttons,
yes,
Anthony Daniels, Burl Ives, Mickey Rooney, all the greats are there. You think the night couldn't possibly get any more star-studded when, holy hell, wouldn't you know it, Sylvester Stallone walks across the stage to present an award. This is exactly what happened to Alvin Sargent, who was one of the 6 writers credited with The Amazing Spider-Man. Alvin would go on to win the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay in 1978, which was at the time called Best Writing for a Screenplay based on material from another medium. I guess the word adapted hadn't been invented yet. Alvin won it for his work on the movie Them Ding Dang Dingoes, a movie that starred Burt Lancaster and Vanessa Redgrave. I'd never heard of it before. It's about a family of Australians that fall in love with the game of baseball.
Man, how have I not seen this?
Because I'm lying. It's not a movie. What he actually won is a movie called Julia, which is an actual movie written by today's Stallone connection, Alvin Sargent. The remarkable thing about Alvin Sargent was his diversity in writing. The same guy who wrote The Amazing Spider-Man also wrote Ordinary People and also wrote What About Bob? How is that possible? How did the same guy write those 3 things? He also wrote Raimi's Spider-Man 2, but he also wrote the movie Paper Moon. What are you talking about? Alvin Sargent died in 2019, but before he did, he was quoted as saying, "When I die, I'm going to have written on my tombstone, finally a plot. He was born in West Philadelphia of Russian Jewish immigrants, joined the Navy in World War II, started as an actor in Hollywood, got a small part in From Here to Eternity, realized that acting wasn't working out for him, so he shifted to screenwriting, won 2 Oscars, and he died at the age of 92 of natural causes. All of this is to say that Alvin Sargent had a life well lived, which is something we should all strive for. But the most important thing to remember about Alvin Sargent is that he wrote one of the greatest lines in all of cinema history. And What About Bob? As Bill Murray is eating corn on the cob, he turns to Julie Haggerty and asks, "Is this hand shucked?" And there you have it, HMPers and Dingalingers. This week's Stallone Connection is screenwriter Alvin Sargent. Adam and Bruce, this is the 342nd episode of this bit, and still no word from Sylvester Stallone.
If the guy's last name was Sargent, why did he join the Navy? There's no chance of being Sergeant in the Navy.
Admiral Sargent.
Give him the old Rear Admiral. All right, here at Movie Podcast, we have our own patented Robin rating system. If you'd like to check that out, head on over to our Reddit subreddit, man, r/Here Movie Podcast. We really appreciate that. Bruce, where does The Amazing Spider-Man from 2012 fall in the Robin rating system for you?
Like I said, the difference between being a good movie and not a good movie sometimes is like 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. I don't even know that it would matter what you took out. I think you could just about randomly cut some time out of this, and I'd probably like it better. This really, sadly to me, falls to the boring category. Like, I don't hate it, and it makes me even more sad because I see a few moments of brilliance. There's stuff here I could have really liked. I know that the franchise was kind of doomed, stopping after the second movie. And I know how much better it got afterwards, how much better it was beforehand. So I'm just bringing a lot of baggage into what's boiling down to be a Stephanie Brown for me.
All right. Sean?
Well, this is truly middle of the road for me. This is Damian Wayne. I really like some performances. Actually, all of the performances are fine. But like Bruce says, it is a little long in the tooth. You can do other things while this movie is going on, and you will follow along just fine. And there's nothing so stunning about it where you have to keep your eyes glued to it. So it's a Damian Wayne for me.
I understand and concur with a lot of these points, but I gotta say, I maybe I just went in with such low expectations or something, but golly, I had a blast watching this movie. And for me, it's a Tim Drake. Surprisingly, it's not perfect. There's a lot of problems with it, but again, like I said, I think this feels like a really cool last of an era sort of flick, and to me, that just kind of works, and I don't know why, but like I said, it was like picking up an old comic and going, oh yeah, I remember that run. That was kind of fun. It may not necessarily, you may never see anything about it again or whatever, but you can remember back on that time and remember it fondly enough. At least I did. So that is it, everybody. Another fine episode in the mix here. Now, I haven't told you guys what we are going to be doing next week, but I'm going to tell you in just a second because this is a gamble. This is a gamble. We make one of these every now and then where I decide to throw some dice. It's either going to be super great or it's going to be super bad. But before we do that, Bruce, where can we find more of your work on the internet?
I'm really, really hoping people will continue to help me out there on YouTube. Really trying hard to get that subscriber number up. So if folks would please go check out YouTube. I've got a new video on Detective Chimp. Who doesn't love chimpanzees? It's a great video to watch. I've got a new camera, doing new things with the editing. Please go check it out. It's youtube.com/C/Bruce Leslie, or just look for Detective Chimp, a magical ape, Legion of Superheroes in a nutshell. You'll find me.
Come on, just listen, think about it, people. Bruce Leslie, Detective Chimp. What else do you need to know? Link is in the show notes.
If you like it, you're really going to like it.
Yeah. Sean, what else?
We've got a podcast called WandaVision 30 Questions, where each week we review through 30 questions each new episode of WandaVision. Hence the name WandaVision 30 Questions.
You put it together, did you? But next week, guys, we're going to be checking out the first in the series. Hopefully this becomes, if this is good, and I don't know if this one's going to be good. I don't know which ones are good and which ones are bad, but we may have another candidate for tradition coming up here, boys, because the movie that we're going to be doing next week is called Santo in the Wax Museum.
Is this the Luchador Santo?
It is indeed.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to be talking about next week. I've heard all kinds of crazy big things about the Santo movies. This one is an older one. I figure we'll kind of start in the early black and white days. That's how long that movie's been around. It started in black and white.
Is this movie going to be hard to find?
It is on YouTube right now. Good. I will send you the link. So and you too can check that out.
Speaking of which, Adam, I have a note here on my notepad that says, remind Adam of his YouTube video, whatever that means.
Oh, yes. So
the George Lucas thing.
Yes, next week, because I had an issue this week that I talked about in the Dinger Zone, or at least or pre-show, whenever it was. The HMP years now. But I got one more week, and it's a lot more work than I had anticipated. But check out the Film Finds YouTube page. Will be up and running. I've got like a big essay that I'm kind of working on and stuff. So subscribe now.
Very good.
That is it, everybody. Join us next week when we're talking Santo in the Wax Museum. For Sweet Sean's co-back from the internet, Bruce Leslie, I'm Adam Fortress. Stay super, everybody.
Bye, Marty and Eve.